Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. We are going to review Emily Dickinson today. I am one of the hosts of the Fierce Women's Book Club, and so we read Emily Dickinson's letters for our March and April pick, and I have a review of them, but I didn't want to just review the letters as I had known nothing about Emily Dickinson. So I also read an ebook, which is a biography of her. So this title, let me read it. The title is Emily Dickinson's Gardening Life, The Plants and Places That Inspired the Iconic Poet. This is by Marta McDowell. And I wanted to complete it off by also reading her poetry. So I also read the poetry of Emily Dickinson. This is the Articus bind up. I got this really cheap on like a 3 for $10 table, and I have finished this. So we're gonna do a 3-in-1 review of them all, but mostly let's talk about the letters of Emily Dickinson. I would also like to talk about them in the order that I read them, as I feel like that's really important to my experience learning about Emily Dickinson. So I first read the biography about Emily Dickinson gardening. Now, this was really important because I literally knew nothing about Emily Dickinson. I knew her name, I knew she was a poet, and that was it. And when Melina picked this book, or this person, I genuinely just knew she was a person. I knew she was a woman and a poet. And I didn't even know that she was American. Like I said, knew nothing. So I feel like it was really good for me to read a biography about her. And this biography, I feel like, was really well researched. It really encompassed a lot about her life. It talked about her beginnings as a child, what homes she grew up in, and how plants really connected her to those places around her. It also showed the letters between her and her family and the poetry that she wrote as a child, or maybe not as a child, but as a teenager, and all through her life. I really loved how it really introduced me to her, the characters around her being her family, different friends that she was in close contact with. It also introduced me to different aspects of her when she was isolated. I felt really connected to Emily Dickinson, and I'm not a gardener. I wish I was better at it, but I'm not. I've just never had that kind of green thumb. And so I feel like I learned a lot, but at the same time, I was able to connect with what I was reading. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because of that. But at the same time, I didn't really fully understand what I was reading because a lot of it was plant-based. Now, it was well-researched and thoroughly well-researched and well-examined for her poetry in regards to the plants, because at the end of it, there was a full section in regards to, like, for example, a rose, and every single poem that Emily Dickinson ever wrote was how many roses, like how many of them had the word rose in it and how many of them referred to roses. So, I mean, Martin McDowell knew her stuff when it came to poetry of Emily Dickinson and flowers and gardening in general. I really enjoyed it, and it really gave me an insight into Emily Dickinson as someone who knew nothing walking in. I just bumped the camera. I'm sorry. Next, I read Emily Dickinson's letters. Now, this one I want to read next because it's her own words. I feel like this book was perfection in the regards of her letters. These letters were so connecting. I felt so connected to Emily and not just Emily Dickinson. Like, I feel like I got to know her as a friend. Her words were so intimate. She was really just another person in the world. She had her flaws. She had her struggles. She had her highs and her lows. And I really connected with that. And as someone who has a chronic illness, I feel like I could relate when she talked about loneliness, or when she talked about struggles, or when she talked about wanting to be with people and she couldn't. I got it. And I really loved all of the letters. I didn't love the construction of the book though. So this book is formatted into different sections. So you have the school years, you have the siblings, you have the parents, and then you have certain aspects where it was like only with her publisher, which I found really interesting. But then you have the grief section, which was hard hitting. I mean, I was like tearing up over that section. But immediately after that, it was the gossip section, which was a really weird transition. And then it just was like, it really ripped you out. And because of the different sections, you had these time jumps that would really jolt you out if you weren't paying attention. So every time I have to be looking at the year and be like, okay, she's 25 in this year. And then the next year, okay, she's 45 now. And then the next year, oh, okay, she's 52. And it'd be like, I have to recalibrate my brain how old she was in each letter. So it was really tricky. And then the next section would be, and they're like, oh wait, she's 16 now. And it was like, oh, I have to remember where she is at in her life again. So that was tricky for this book. I gave it 4 stars because of the formatting, but I really loved this book, and I would love to sit down with Emily Dickinson based on these letters. I really felt a kinship with her because of this. I would have loved to just sit down with her and talk just about everyday life, because she just sounded like someone who I would just like to get to know, honestly. Yeah, she really stuck out to me as someone who, she just stuck out to me as someone who with incredible strength, even in hard times. And I will say one thing for this though, I did not remember, and this might be my own fault, but I did not remember reading what her chronic illness was, which, if I am remembering right from my research on the side, it was kidney problems, where it caused incredible pain in the kidneys. And I did not read that in this book, which I wish I had read in this one in particular. And I did not read that either in the biography, which I wish I had read in that one as well. So I was disappointed in that aspect as well. But I really recommend reading this if you want to get an insight into Emily Dickinson's life. So following that up, I read Emily Dickinson's poetry. So I felt like after reading the biography, I would read her letters, which would then give me insight into her own words. And then I wanted to read what she wrote as her creative outlet. Now, I don't know if it was this bind up or if it was just me being someone who likes to listen to poetry as opposed to reading poetry, but I'm giving this collection 3 stars. I think I just was overwhelmed with the amount of death poems in this. And I just didn't really connect with a lot of these things. And I looked on Goodreads, and many of the reviews are very similar to mine, at least the written reviews. There are many 4 stars, but the written reviews are very similar to mine, at least. This one was okay in regards to that, but I wish I could have listened to the poems instead. So there's that. Poetry is not typically my thing unless I listen to it, and when I listen to it, I tend to enjoy it a lot better. So I'm glad I read Emily Dickinson's poetry, though. I've owned this collection for a long time, so I was happy to read her words after reading her letters. So I was able to get the full experience of learning about her history and her life and her family, then learning about her through her own words, and then learning about her through her creative outlet. I feel like that was a really great way to experience Emily Dickinson through another time, another era, and just see her through a modern lens and through a cultural lens. I also loved her references all through the 3 books about literature and, how she was influenced by different creative authors or creative influences. I think that was really interesting, and Shakespeare and poetry. I think it was really interesting to see how different people inspired Emily Dickinson. Also, once I had read the biography about how flowers inspired her, it was so incredible to read this one and see how many flowers made appearances in her letters, and how she just loved talking about flowers and her garden, and how she was so often in the garden. And then in this one, how flowers were so apparent. I genuinely think that made my experience reading her letters and her poetry so strong, because I was suddenly aware of all the flowers and all the garden references, because I had read the biography first. So I knew how important that was to her, not only for just hobby sake, but also family value sake and land sake. I knew how important it was. So I think that was a really important book for me to read first, and I'm really glad that I did. So I really recommend reading that biography first if you are wanting some background information and you know nothing about Emily Dickinson. But this is a really great collection to pick up if you do know some background information already. If you don't know any background information, it can be a little confusing because there is none given. However, it is a beautiful way to get to know Emily Dickinson through her own way of speaking to people in her life. And I thought it was a very touching way to learn about someone. I think letters can really be the windows to people's souls, and this was a great way to see into Emily's soul. So that will be it for my review of Emily Dickinson. This is a 3-book review. These two plus Emily Dickinson's gardening, and I hope that you'll pick up all 3 of these. Maybe not this collection completely, but I do plan on listening at least to more of Emily Dickinson's poetry. Maybe I'll find a good audiobook. If you know of any, please leave it down in the comments below. But also, if you have read Emily Dickinson's letters with us, or if you read it by yourself, or you're interested, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to chat about them with you. Please also subscribe if you're new here. You can also hit that notification bell if you'd like to get notifications from me. Also, you can hit that like button if you would like to. Our next Fierce Women's Book Club book is Elizabeth by J. Randy Teraboli. I picked the book myself. I should know this. It's about Elizabeth Taylor, which I think it will be fascinating. I have not watched any Elizabeth Taylor movies myself, even though I picked the book, but I am a big movie buff, and I know Elizabeth Taylor suffered with migraines, which is my personal chronic illness. So I'm super excited to read this biography, and I hope that you'll join us for that book. So I'll hope to see you at least with that one. If you'd like to join the Voxer group for discussions, you can let me know down in the comments. But also, if you have any suggestions for fierce women who have had chronic illness throughout history, please let me know in the comments down below. It's always good to hear about women, or men even, who have had to fight some fierce battles and who have never given up. I would love to hear from you, like I said, down in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.